The story of Abraham Lincoln. He was born in 1808 and died in 1865. Lincoln was born on February 12, 1808 in Hardin County, Kentucky. Abraham's father was Thomas Lincoln and his mother was Nancy Hanks. He had two siblings whose names were Sarah and Thomas, who died in infancy. His childhood was lonely until his stepmother came, but Abraham was not very close with his father. During Abe's teenage years, he was strong and tall and worked for his neighbors and businessmen. He had to give all his earnings to his father, and when he turned 22, he moved to New Salem, Illinois, and during this time, he made a living on manual labor. An interesting fact about Abraham Lincoln is he was self-educated. During his childhood, his resources were limited, and his stepmother, Sarah, encouraged him to read when he was a child. Abraham was fascinated with reading his entire life. In 1837, he began his law practice. He also served a single term in the House of Representatives. During his time in the House of Reps, from 1847 to 1849, he showed his loyalty to the Whig Party. He was the lone Whig in the state of Illinois at the time. As a Whig supporter, Abraham believed in infrastructure and tariffs. Abraham joined the Republican Party in 1856. During this time, Abraham's views on slavery began to shift to more of a moral standpoint. Abraham believed that African Americans were not equal to whites, but they should have the basic same rights. In 1858, Lincoln ran for a seat in the Senate against Stephen Douglas. These two discussed various issues, but the core issue here was slavery. Lincoln ended up losing this election, but this campaign helped him to be known nationally in the politics field. By 1860, Abraham Lincoln began his campaign for the presidency. The Republican Party chose Lincoln to be the front-runner. His nomination was due in part to his moderate views on slavery and his support for improving the national infrastructure. He won the presidency by taking the North and the Electoral College. In 1860, Lincoln selected his cabinet members. Lincoln selected a strong cabinet which included many of his rivals. This formed the famous phrase of "hold your friends close and your enemies closer," which is still used today. By the time Lincoln was inaugurated as the 16th U.S. President in 1861, 7 southern states had seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. Lincoln deeply felt that he had to preserve the Union at all costs. The tensions between the North and the South resulted in a civil war. On January 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This was the proclamation that would change the future of many lives of people in the United States. The Emancipation Proclamation freed slaves in 10 states, and this applied to the slaves in the states that are still in the rebellion during the Civil War, which were the Confederate States. The emancipation was one of the most important parts of American history because it eventually led to the abolishment of slavery in America. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln gave one of his most famous speeches during his presidency, and often one of the most quoted speeches in American history. Lincoln's speech was called the Gettysburg Address. The Gettysburg Address was a famous speech that President Lincoln gave in front of over 15,000 people about the significance of the war. Although it was a short speech, it still portrayed a message that will be remembered for generations. Lincoln's historic address redefined the Civil War as a struggle not just for the Union, but for also the principle of human equality. Another aspect of this speech was he addressed the importance of the Declaration of Independence and what it stands for. On April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Booth. Lincoln was shot in the back of the head at Ford's Theater. Sadly, Lincoln's plan of the reconstruction of the southern states was never implemented because of the assassination. Lincoln was buried in Springfield but did not have multiple showings along the way. Around 25 million Americans attended his services from the White House and along the train stops to Springfield. Abraham Lincoln inspired so many people throughout his life and still continues to do so today. Lincoln is one of the greatest figures in our history because he faced incredible challenges throughout his journey and conquered his challenges with courage, passion, and knowledge.